Hey, and welcome to Let's Talk About Natural English for busy people like you. So yeah, today we're going to talk about cities and towns and stuff like that. That means lots of everyday words and phrases. Words and phrases like in the middle of nowhere, one-horse town, buildings dating back to the 16th century, thriving satellite towns, Milan, born and bred, and many, many more. So yeah, let's talk about your hometown. I guess a good place to start would be to get a strong image of what your town looks like. Is your hometown a seaside town? Or was it established inland? Maybe it was built on a river or by a lake or in the mountains or in a valley or just like some towns in the middle of nowhere. And why does your town even exist? Was it part of a major trade route, or does it hold some sort of religious significance? Or is it a historic market town? Or maybe it's a resort town due to its gorgeous beaches or natural spring water or peaceful location and fresh air. A place where people go to get away from it all. And as a result, maybe it's thronging with tourists during the tourist season and a total ghost town out of season. Or maybe your town's a major transport hub. It might even have an international airport and a bustling central train station. And the streets might always be jam-packed with people and full of the hustle and bustle of people going about their daily lives. Or maybe it's just a one-horse town. A boring, quiet little place with not much to do except sit around and stare at the walls. And how is your hometown laid out? Is it like a lot of American towns, all laid out in a grid with neatly named streets like 5th Street and 10th Avenue? Or is it more windy and higgledy-piggledy with labyrinthian streets you could get lost in all afternoon? And how big is it? Is your hometown spread out? Does it sprawl over a large area? Or are the buildings all clustered together over a small area? Some towns and cities are very, very modern, with shiny glass buildings and ugly plastic buildings, and lots of skyscrapers and high-rises. Others are more historic places with A-listed buildings dating back to the 16th century and plenty of historic sites. And to be fair, a lot of cities have a bit of both, right? With a historic centre, but as you travel outwards, it gets more spread out and more modern. And some cities, I'm looking at you, Mr. Belgrade, some cities are totally hodgepodge with no consistency at all, where you'll see a big plastic monstrosity next to a shiny skyscraper, next to a decaying Renaissance beauty. And yeah, when you're thinking about a town or a city, and when you're considering moving to one, then transport, of course, is a major thing to think about. Is the city designed around cars and roads, or is it good for pedestrians and cyclists with lots of bike lanes and pedestrianized high streets? If you ask me, and maybe you're not, but if you ask me, I think we should pedestrianize the roads in the center of every city. If we must have cars in the city, let's put them underground. Imagine how much nicer it would be to walk around town without roads, without cars. It would change the quality of life by so much. Now, I know this is a controversial opinion, so if you don't agree, you know what to do. Go to the comments and we can fight this out. Anyway, yeah, where was I? Transport. Whether you're driving or taking public transport, you'll want to be able to get to and from home, right? So be it cars or trams or metro or bike, you'll need to get around somehow. And what mode of transport you opt for will depend very much on where you live. I mean, it's not such a big deal if you live in the city centre or the inner city, especially if you're near the high street. Even most inner city suburbs are within walking distance to a lot of the major parts of the city. But if you live in the suburbs, which are usually large residential areas outside the city centre, or even the outskirts, which are even further out of town and mostly consist of small factories, car shops and yoga studios, then granted, you might well need a car or a very, very good public transport system. Some people who work in big cities, and this happens a lot with capital cities, they work in the city but live in a completely different town. As a result, if you look at a map around places like London, Moscow and New York, you'll find a lot of thriving satellite towns. These places are all within the commuter belt. Why the commuter belt? Well, because these places are full of commuters, people who want to pay lower rents or lower mortgages, but still work in the big cities and who, well, they commute. They travel to and from work. In fact, metropolises like Istanbul have completely swallowed up their satellite towns, and they're now no longer separate towns, but mere suburbs of the beast that is the city. And if you've ever played SimCity, you'll know that some towns and cities are divided neatly up into residential areas, full of houses and apartments, commercial areas, full of shops and offices, and industrial areas, full of factories and depots and wild dogs for some reason. This sort of segregation is a result of the sort of strict zoning laws you'll find in hyper-organized town planning countries like the USA, where you can cycle for hours and hours and hours and still not see a single shop. But most places are more integrated, and you'll see a healthy mix of shops, offices and homes in the same area. A lot of the larger cities have ring roads. These are major roads or motorways, or as the Americans like to say, highways, that completely surround the city. They help divert traffic away from the city centre and reduce pollution in the town. And which part of town do you live in? Are you in a residential area? You might even live in a housing estate, a government-built area with lots of apartments and houses, known in America as the projects. These are usually associated with working-class neighbourhoods, and in some cases can be a bit rough. In Europe, a lot of these were built in the 50s and 60s and sport a concrete brutalist design. Some of them, like Alexandra Road Estate in London near Abbey Road, are, in my opinion, absolutely gorgeous. But, to be fair, these are not to everyone's taste. Or maybe you're in a gated community or housing complex. These are like tiny villages surrounded by high walls, CCTV cameras, security, and although safe, always feel to me as if the world has gone mad and we all need to hide from it now. The zombie apocalypse is upon us. Don't live in the streets. Hide behind the walls. To be fair though, if you're from a dodgy neighbourhood, then this might actually sound quite appealing. You might even live in a ghetto, a very, very poor part of town, a very rough part of town, which might even be a no-go area for cops, or if you insist, the police. In other words, you might live on the wrong side of the tracks, and the idea of living in the posh part of town, even in a gated community, might actually sound like a good idea. The interesting thing about these rough parts of town is when they get gentrified. The cycle is always the same. You have a run-down, deprived neighbourhood, then the artists move in for the low rents and occasionally the large spaces offered by old factories and warehouses. As more artists move in and the neighbourhoods become up-and-coming and more cosmopolitan, then cafes and bars start popping up and the property prices go through the roof. That's when the real estate investors, people whose job it is to buy houses, come in, buy up half the neighbourhood and muscle the artists and the original residents out, leaving it to the wealthy. But back to you and your hometown. Are you from where you live? Can you say that you're Milan born and bred, or that you're a Dhelian born and bred, or that you're a New Yorker born and bred? Basically, that you were born and bred, grew up in the town. And what is there to do? What is there to do in your hometown? Maybe in the summer you get a lot of tourists, or perhaps there are a lot of fun fairs and stuff for the kids. In some towns, like my hometown of Brighton, you can see the London to Brighton Marathon and countless street festivals, and sometimes some other very weird and wonderful things too. if you keep your eye open in Brighton. Or is your hometown well known? Or is it even famous? Maybe it's famous for its amazing food, or its crazy nightlife, or its incredibly fresh air. Or it could be famous for something bad, like its crime rates, or terrible public transport, or lack of public facilities. Whatever your hometown is like, I want to hear from you. Tell me about where you're from. Are you from a wealthy place or a deprived place? Is your hometown famous for something? If so, what? Is it on the up, or has it had its heyday? Let me know in the comments about where you live or where you're from. And let's talk about your hometown. Before you go, just like one thing. It's YouTube, right? And you know what happens on YouTube? There's rules, right? And if you like the video, if you enjoyed it, and if you've watched it so far, you have to. It's the rules of YouTube. It's nothing to do with me. You have to click like. You have to click subscribe, or you're expelled from the world. So like and subscribe, of course, as usual, so I can keep on making lovely videos like this for lovely people like you. Cool. Thanks for watching. That was fun, as usual. And I'll see you next time. Meanwhile, ciao for now.